second era began with the new peace between the dragons and the Peter Griffins, also known as the Birds. So around this time, the Riemann Empire had controlled most of Tamriel except for Morrowind. However, things weren't always going well for the Riemann Empire, and neither were they in the present, because the High Elves did not exactly like the Empire's rule and were on the verge of revolt. Now, not much is known or recorded about the Second Era. However, the historical documents at the time did mention early in the Second Era, the secretive Order of Assassins, known as a Dark Brotherhood, was formed. They, in the future, will become very important due to the assassination of Emperor Pelagius. In the 184th year of the Second Era, the immortality theory of the dragons was again challenged by the slaying of another dragon. 230th year of the Second Era, Venus Galerian, the Great Mage, would go to found the Mages Guild, which would be quite important later on, just like the Dark Brotherhood, but for far different reasons. Around year 390 of the Second Era, a pact was formed between feudal nations in Elsweyr that founded a united kingdom of Elsweyr. Around the 401st year of the Second Era, the Fighters Guild would be formed. The Fighters Guild is almost like the Mercenaries Guild that would be formed later on. However, it was more of combating different threats to Tamriel that would appear from vampires to werewolves to undead or whatever, and less of just sending different groups after different goals and stuff. Also, the Fighters Guild was in battle much more often than the Mercenaries Guild, so that's a striking difference. Over 100 years later, in Second Era 583, the Emperor of Cyrodiil, Varen Aquilarius, attempted to light the dragon fires, which basically protect Nirn and everything else, basically just Mundus, from oblivion. However, the ritual was actually a trick by the master necromancer Mannimarco, who basically tricked the 5 companions, led by Varen Aquilarius, into doing this foul ritual, which would tear the veil between Mundus and Oblivion, causing an event called the Soul Burst. It was during this time that Molag Bal, the Daedric Prince of Domination, was able to send his Daedric forces into Nirn. However, the necromancer Mannimarco made a grave mistake when he was able to trick the Vestige, whose real name is lost to time, but we know that he was a great warrior, into getting sacrificed during some ritual. Now, the Vestige, with the help of the Nord Lyris Titanborn, was able to escape Coldharbour. They then rescued the Prophet, who is actually Varen Aquilarius, by the way, out of, sorry about that. They were able to rescue Varen Aquilarius from Coldharbour, which is basically the, realm of death and despair and torture and all that. Very bad place. So they then rescued Abner Tharn, which is he's the Imperial Chancellor of the Elder Council. A very prestigious position. He comes from a very wealthy family, all that. Might get into that in another video. And they also rescued one of the sword singers from Cold Harbor, Sai Sahan, who is a very powerful warrior. And with all those people back together, they reformed the Five Companions and launched an assault on Cold Harbor with the Mages and Fighters Guild, eventually killing Manamarco in battle and defeating Molag Bal, which restored the shield from Oblivion back to Mundus. Now, you might have noticed that that explanation of the whole thing took a while. That's because that is the first of many events, major events in the timeline that was foretold by the legendary Elder Scrolls, which are basically these scroll thingies that they like tell the future and stuff. They're very complicated. But yeah, the Weirdverse is basically just a mix of a bunch of different fiction stuff. So go look up lore on the Elder Scrolls themselves if you want more information on that, because they are way too complicated for me to get into. Tiber Septim is soon born, who's like known as the greatest leader in all of Mundus' history, basically. He united all of Tamriel under one banner, and wasn't exactly happy with that result, and he tried to invade Akavir, which was a complete disaster. Akavir is like a continent of like snake people, the far east of Tamriel. They're like humanoid snake people. The Akaviri are like humanoid snake people. Very mysterious. Like I said, the Weirdverse is basically a combination of the Elder Scrolls and a bunch of other fiction universes. So, yeah, go look up stuff on the Akaviri, since I don't really know how to explain them. Very, like, mysterious part of the Elder Scrolls lore, so yeah, kind of hard for me to explain them in like the Weirdverse kind of thing. Man, I don't know. Other kind of events during the Second Era are really vague, but I'll list them as best as I can. The Ash Vampires, led by Dagoth-Ur, which is like, he's kind of like an evil demigod. They awaken in the province of Morrowind. Now, Tiber Septim hasn't actually been, like, uniting Tamriel yet. Until now. This is the turning point. Tiber Septim now begins conquering Tamriel after the Ash Vampires awaken. Now, the Tiber Septim, after uniting Tamriel fully, then declares the Second Era to be over. By the way, you might have noticed, even though the Second Era stuff is pretty vague, this video was more detailed and more, like, longer than the First Era video. And that's because it's only going to get better, like, more detailed and more, and, like, longer from here, because history on Nirn is going to be documented better. Bye.